Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday night trade deadline day here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, here with Andrew Destin, our Pirates insider, and Jason Mackey, our sports columnist. Paul Zeise might be joining us here at some point shortly as well. We're going to be talking Pirates trade deadline, what they've already done, what they might do, reacting, live to the final news before 6 p.m. Of course, we know sometimes deals can come in after 6 p.m., so we might hang around a little bit after that if we think a move might be coming. But in the meantime, we got a lot of baseball talk. So if you're joining us on replay, feel free to scroll forward an hour, and if you're just looking for trade deadline reaction, because we're talking to you at about 5 p.m. right now, so we don't yet know what the Pirates are going to do. Or you can just sit down and enjoy the whole stream and wait for the reaction as it happens. Before we get started, just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of our podcast. It's the North Shore Tavern. It's brought to you, as always. If you love baseball, you'll love the North Shore Tavern. The interior is wall-to-wall Pirates. There are appetizers, entrees, cocktails, and, of course, steak and seafood on a sizzling lava stone. Open every day. The North Shore Tavern across from PNC Park is Pittsburgh's home for steak on a stone. Guys, I guess let's start here with predictions of what we think might happen over this next hour and a half. There's been a lot of names that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. A lot of outfielders. Jason, I think you talked specifically about Yandy Diaz this morning. Bryan De La Cruz. We've had Taylor Ward is a guy that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks that's still out there as we're starting this live stream. I guess I'll start with you, Jason, and we'll go to Andrew. What are your predictions for what we're going to be talking about by 6 p.m. here?
It's not going to be Yandy Diaz. I don't think it's going to be Taylor Ward, although I think there's a better chance of it being Taylor Ward than Yandy Diaz, and that's not really saying much. Honestly, Adam, I think it's Bryan De La Cruz. I think he makes the most sense for them at this point. I do think they want to do something. I think they will do something. I understand the sentiment for Brent Rooker. JJ Bleday was one of my options that I liked even a little bit more when factoring what the A's might want. Both of those guys are off the table. I think De La Cruz is the fit at this point. I don't think the Pirates can afford to have today come and go and then not do anything. I think that sends the wrong message to their fans. I think it sends the wrong message to those in the clubhouse. So I look at how we can sort of create this Venn diagram, what makes the most sense, who they've been in contact with, what type of player they're looking for. They wouldn't have to give up a ton to get De La Cruz. That's where I land.
Andrew, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm going to second a lot of what Jason's saying there, but De La Cruz certainly, based on the guys who are available, I think, if we're going to do, different history and play it back and say, oh, what could they have done? I think there are three outfielders that come to mind for me that would have been maybe more logical fits, or would have been fits at least that personally I would have liked for this Pirates team. And in Jesse Winker and Lane Thomas and Tommy Pham. Those are three guys that I all thought made a good deal of sense, but obviously they've been traded to different teams. De La Cruz is the one that makes a good deal of sense. The only issue there is that if you're looking to solve or, plug a hole in center field, I don't think that he's exactly that guy for you. Hasn't been a regular center fielder in a couple of years now, not exactly a great defender, but does provide an impact bat. He's on track to set a new career high in home runs, probably going to do the same with RBIs or come real close to it. He's a guy that makes a lot of sense for this team, but some of those other names that get thrown out there, like Brent Rooker, I've talked to people, with the organization out there in Oakland, and it sounds like the sentiment there is that it's going to take a lot to get the guy. It's going to take at least 3 or 4 prospects, probably. They view him as a part of their future. They would have to be really wowed. So as much as that guy's a big impact bat that's out there and has been linked to various teams, I don't know that he's going to come to Pittsburgh. I wouldn't exactly bank on that one.
Let's talk a little bit about Bryan De La Cruz and what he brings to the table. What Baseball Reference has him at 0.2 wins above replacement. He's got 245 batting average, 18 homers, 51 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, OPS of 707, OPS plus is 93, OPS plus obviously is 100 is average. So what they're, by Baseball Reference's appraisal, he is a below average hitter. I think the argument from a lot of people in the comments, and I already see some angry comments here under the stream. I think a lot of people are going to say, if he's a below average hitter by OPS plus, is he making this situation for the Pirates any better? Is he meaningfully addressing the offense that has been their Achilles heel for much of the season? Jason, I'll start with you. If you take that stat profile and you plug it into this team, how does it play?
Well, I mean, he would have, I think, the third highest home run total on the team. You could look at that stat profile. And I mean, I'm not propping up Bryan De La Cruz as the answer to all of their offensive problems. Please don't take it that way. But he's got 37 home runs the past 2 years. His debut season was 2021. He had a 112 OPS then. I think those are some of the good things. Another thing I'd look at, Adam, is the Pirates have been after guys with years of club control. Right now, he makes just a little bit above the minimum. He's going to be going through arbitration for the first time this winter. I know fans are going to look at that and get upset and say, well, it's because he's cheap. Well, it kind of is. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I also think at that age, at that level of experience, you can still get better. I don't know if we have a complete picture of what Bryan De La Cruz is. I've seen some power. I talked to a scout this afternoon, National League scout, who was actually very high on De La Cruz and how he prepares, how he handles it at bat. Thought there was a lot there. And then there's plenty of physical tools as well. So, I mean, if he's being coached differently, if he's being developed differently, if they have tools that they can take advantage of, I understand it. I would like to, this is a bigger picture thought, but I'd really like to see them do something. I think that it sends the right message. And I think you could look at, do we give up a whole bunch and then what are we getting back for, say, Taylor Ward? Or do we give up probably less, maybe? And what can we get? Can we get De La Cruz for a prospect who's ranked 17th or 21st or what? I'm just making up rankings, but I don't think you would have to give up the farm to get somebody like De La Cruz. So anyway, I mean, I could see him improving the offense. I'm not turning down any improvement of the offense. And I also just look at it and say, like, his numbers so far in 2024, we can't automatically assume that they're going to be exactly that if a trade happens.
Andrew, your thoughts on De La Cruz?
Yeah, it's a lot of similar sentiments there. I'm going to probably echo a lot of what Jason's saying again there. But I mean, I think the deal there is there's probably a belief, I would have to think, that whichever team gets him, whether that's the Pirates or elsewhere, that there's a potential to unlock some stuff there that hasn't been fully unleashed, right? This is a guy who's parts of 4 big league seasons. He's never really drawn a whole lot of walks. Maybe that's a difficult component of his game to really add. But if there was ever a franchise that could get a guy to start walking more, you'd have to think Pittsburgh would be a place where that could take place, where you could make him a little bit more selective. Maybe that brings out another level to his game. Not entirely sure about that. But I think it's a guy that, I mean, like Jason said, this is a guy who has a lot of tools working for him, certainly would be an impact bat in the middle of the order, at least in my mind, for this Pirates team. And to some degree, you have to wonder, what level would you get out of a guy if he's surrounded by other talented guys? Now, I'm not saying by any means that this Pirates lineup is murderer's row or anything, but you have to still think that, okay, if you supplemented him with a guy like, you supplement him near Bryan Reynolds or O'Neal Cruz, what exactly does that look like?
All right. Breaking news.
Jason, go ahead.
Bryan De La Cruz to the Pirates. Timely conversation.
Wow, there we go.
It's the reaction show.
It rarely works out this well. All right. Well, since we've already done a lot of I think we pre-reacted here. Jason, do you have any insight on what they did give up for that?
I do not, because this trade is 50 seconds old. We will find out. We'll all find out in real time. So I'm going to keep refreshing this. Andrew, I don't know if you want to send some messages out. We'll sort of tag team this.
Yep, that's where we're at.
Is Noah writing this? Do you need to jump off here and write?
Thankfully, we got this one. Well, we've got this one pre-written, so I guess you could say we had a hunch this one was coming.
All right, a pre-write gone right for once. We had a pre-write gone wrong in spring, so the pre-write has gone right, and you guys handle that. We'll find out who De La Cruz is traded for, but again, I think this makes a lot of sense for the Pirates. It really does. It gives them a bet. I mean, again, there's going to be people that take a negative view of this, but I look at it as the Pirates need to do something to show that they're interested this year. They've done that. They also need to do something that positions them well for years into the future. And they've lacked young bats, young outfield bats. They need some power. So, yeah, as long as the what they gave up is not crazy, which I don't think it would have to be. This makes a lot of sense.
I guess let's because since we've already said a fair amount about what he brings to the table statistically, where, Andrew, do you think he fits on a night-to-night basis? Where's the slot in the lineup that you're looking at? Where's the slot in the defensive alignment that you're targeting for him? Is it obviously right field, just given that he's not played a ton of center field, or do you see something different there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be left. I think that's something to consider there, and I think it's a big burden to place on a guy like Bryan Reynolds. I think that's a lot to ask the guy to move back to center, but I don't think it's inconceivable to say that that's an option. But left field is where he played primarily this year. He's played a little bit of right in the past, but left is certainly the spot. So I look to it as, okay, well, I would say that left field is probably where you would like to, but I'm curious to see how it goes. I think corner outfield is certainly where you start. I feel like it would be extending the guy a little bit too much if you were to put him in center from the start, especially given that, A, he hasn't done it terribly much the last couple of years. He's not exactly an elite glove as it is anyway, but I suppose anything's possible. I suppose it's entirely possible that they say, okay, we're going to roll with De La Cruz up the middle and center, but I would consider that fairly surprising considering they still do have Michael A. Taylor, even though, Jack Swinsky now being in the minors.
What lineup range do you think he's going to be in?
Ooh, good question. I don't know. I mean, with the Marlins, he's been a middle of the order guy, whether that's the 3-hole, the 4-hole. I know with the Marlins last year, primarily in that 3 spot. I think he'd slot in well as a cleanup guy. I don't know if that's an everyday type of deal. Maybe they mix and match a little bit depending on matchups and things of that nature. But I'd have to think you won't mess with anything that you're doing with Reynolds and Cruz. Maybe De La Cruz is a guy that you slot in behind the two of them. That might be a logical answer there. Maybe you mix it up a little bit with the lefty-righty stuff. Just given that you've got with Rowdy Tellez basically being an everyday guy at this point, maybe you work with that to some degree. Curious to see exactly how that all works out.
Yeah, interesting report from Noah in Houston. By the way, guys, Billy McKinney and Jake Woodford are there on the taxi squad. I don't know what that means at this point. And I believe Jun-Seok Shim is one. I might be Andrew. You might have to help me with that. Is one of the players going back to the Marlins. We know that.
Yeah, that's what it looks like here. And he's the one who, correct me if I'm wrong, he had Tommy John surgery earlier this year. I think
that sounds right.
Yeah. So guy who hasn't been pitching, if at all, this year. But
do we know where he ranks on the Pirates prospect list?
I just had it up there. I think he's in that middle range. Andrew, if you beat me to it, you win the prize.
We're looking at number
17. Yep.
Boom. Look at that. Right on the same time.
So is from your perspective, guys, is he the centerpiece of this deal? Or are there other guys you think could be higher on that list that are going out?
I would be shocked, Adam, if there was somebody higher on this list also going out, which I guess would technically put Shim as the centerpiece of the deal. I just don't see it. Like pitching wise, we're looking at Michael Kennedy, Hunter Barco, Xander Muth. I mean, that would be a gross overpay. I feel like if you're going position player wise or somebody below him, I could understand that. That makes sense. But, Shim is a guy actually going back to early in the season when we were talking about who was the right-hander the Pirates were maybe going to add. They got pretty far along with them. He ended up getting hurt. Help me, Marlins. No, not Jesus Luzardo.
Hold on, filibuster for me. I'll look it up for you.
All right. Well, the Marlins were looking to trade a couple starters, and then they had some injuries, and then that sort of put the kibosh on a lot of things. And the Pirates were in some trade talks with the Marlins during spring training whenever they were still looking for starting pitching. I remember we thought that was a big thing. Edward Cabrera. Yeah,
right.
I filibustered for myself, but that was somebody who was discussed in that deal. So it would make sense that a piece of it would kind of carry over there. I mean, that's nothing to me. That you gotta give something. So be it. I like it. I like it as long as we're not going to find out that they gave away, I don't know, Thomas Harrington or something like that in addition. And I don't think that's the case.
Right.
It sounds to me, guys, like a lot of dealing from a position of strength, which is what we talked about going into this. Is if the Pirates have a lot of these rotation spots already locked down by guys who are already here, so Paul Skenes, Jared Jones, conceivably, and guys that may be coming up, Mike Burrows, Harrington, Bubba Chandler's down there. There's a whole bunch of other names. It doesn't sound like this is going to be a loss that the Pirates miss unless things go horribly wrong or he takes a turn for the stratosphere. Am I right on that?
Andrew, you want to tackle that?
Oh, sorry. I totally missed the question. I'm like the guy not paying attention in school. Sorry, Adam. I apologize.
Basically, the question was, so things are going to have to go dramatically wrong for the Pirates to miss this particular prospect in terms of what they already have stacked up in the minors with pitching.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's in part why we saw the Quinn Priester Nick York deal. Obviously that's a little bit different given the reality that, okay, Nick York is a further along guy and Quinn Priester is a further along guy. But I think that goes into it is that there's a surplus with starting pitching. There's a surplus with pitching in the organization. That's certainly not the case on the hitting side. So to deal from a position of strength, and specifically if we're going to really narrow it down with right-handers, that's something that there's a reason that guys like Anthony Solometo are so prized, the left-handed pitching prospect, is because there aren't many of them, right? They're hard to come by, and there's a million righties in the organization that they at least feel decently about. And there have been guys that have exceeded expectations at various levels. I mean, you can even go down to AA Altoona, and there's guys like Po-Yu Chen that have been tremendous this season. Thomas Harrington has been excellent, of course. Bubba Chandler's been good. Braxton Ashcraft when healthy. All these guys. So you look at it and say, okay, well, it's an area of need. I don't think that losing out on Kim is going to be one that really is a big concern for the Pirates' sake.
I see Jason looking at his phone, so I'm going to filibuster for him a little bit. But I'll ask you this question, Andrew. What do we think in terms of the long term here in terms of this deal? Obviously, De La Cruz, I'm looking at Spot Rack here, has ARB1 next year, ARB2 next year, or ARB2 in 2026 and ARB3 in 2027. We talked about, leading into the trade deadline, are the Pirates going to get rentals, or are they going to get guys that they can control and that can be parts of the big league team? Do we need to be thinking of him as this is part of the package? This guy that's going to be here for a while, and that they hope maybe plays better than he has to this point, and they believe has some upside and is going to be, not just a short-term fix to the offensive problem.
Right, and I think that's part of it is that I think this fills the needs of what Ben Cherington and frankly what the front office has kind of said for a while here is that it's not just 2024, right? It's beyond that as well. De La Cruz checks those boxes certainly. And just one point of it too is that this is a guy who's been a pretty consistent bat the whole way, right? Like you look at his 4-year track record, it's not as if he's had a season where he's really had a dip in play. Maybe he's been more of a league average guy aside from the home run totals or the power totals. I would say this is a guy that you look at and say, yeah, Bryan De La Cruz, part of the future. And maybe you can tap more into that potential, still relatively young at 27, a guy that can play the outfield. I think there's a lot to like there. By no means a finished product, by no means the perfect guy or the dream candidate of anybody you could have gotten at this deadline. But they were linked to him for a little while, and it makes sense now as to why, because, projectable, controllable beyond this year, won't be a free agent until 2027. There's a lot to like. There's certainly some room for growth, but that's what you're going to get when you're not giving up your blue chip true prospects, which it never really felt like the Pirates were going to be willing to do at this deadline.
All right. I'm back among the living here. Thank you for the filibuster. This is a weird experience, by the way, for somebody who's plenty neurotic about how I do this job. This is a trip for me. But so a couple things. Garret Forrester is going to be one of the guys going back. It looks like Garret Forrester and Jun-Seok Shim are the two MLB pipeline number 17 and number 18. And something else out there, apparently the Pirates and the Houston Astros are talking about something. I always enjoy these trades where you have two teams playing one another and all of a sudden the GMs, I picture this as, probably funnier than it actually is. Like they're going to get a coffee or something, or they see each other and walk into the bathroom. They're like, hey, and pull one another aside and try to start talking about deals. I don't know. I doubt it worked that way with Dana Brown, but in any case, Pirates might still have something cooking here.
We will keep our eyes tuned to that. One other question I had on Bryan. Oh, I think we have Paul Zeise is hopping in. Paul, hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I guess I'll go to you while we're all working the phones here and stuff. Bryan De La Cruz is official, 17th and 18th ranked prospects. Can I get your thoughts on the deal so far?
Well, I mean, I think that if you think about what the Pirates needed, I like it. I like the fact that he's a guy who they have control of for another year or two at least. So
3.
You know what? They made a deal to get better in an area that they needed to get better. So I don't know why anybody would have a problem with this. And obviously for all of the prospect wants out there, they didn't have to give up hardly anything. I know that there'll be some people who will be crying a river about what they gave up. But overall, I mean, so they added him. They added some help in the bullpen. Not sure that, I know we had some other names in mind, and then there are some other players in mind. But, I mean, I'm not sure that you can really, kill them that much because I thought we would be sitting here really honestly talking about them doing absolutely nothing. So they did something. And it seems like it's somebody that was on the radar for a long, long time.
Isiah Kiner-Falefa is
yes. I
was
seeing the messages in the chat. Jason, give us what you got there.
Isiah Kiner-Falefa is coming to the Pirates. That's what I got. I don't know much. I know he plays a lot of positions. I know he used to play for the Toronto Blue Jays, and I'm going to start refreshing my memory. He is a 29-year-old. He's played shortstop, third, outfield, right-handed batter. He's played for the Texas Rangers, the Yankees, obviously most recently the Blue Jays. Not a huge power guy, 670 career OPS. Actually having a pretty good year, though, this year, 758 OPS in 82 games, nearly 300 plate appearances. This to me, guys, I mean, it's the Pirates love versatility, something terrible. Find somebody that loves you the way Pirates love versatility, but somebody they should be able to bounce around to a couple different spots, whether it's with Nick Gonzalez being out, give him a try at second base. Who knows? Going to have opportunities in the outfield, but we'll see what they gave up. But, this is an offensive upgrade. It's not hard to get that. So that's it's probably explaining why Billy McKinney's in Houston.
Yes. I think I've seen some people in the chat note that he is related to Ralph Kiner, the former great Bucko. I'm reading off of Wikipedia here. He is the second cousin twice removed of Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Ralph Kiner on his mother's side. So there's a connection. I think people are gonna like that. There's a lot of people remember Ralph Kiner that may be watching. I don't think any of us on the stream do, but he was a great Bucko. He's got the hand statue out in left field at PNC Park. So that's going to be a cool thing for him to have a relation to that statue and a tie to the Pirates. I'll read off a few more of the stats here. He's 3.1 Baseball Reference wins above replacement, so that's pretty significant. That projects to maybe a win and a half over the rest of the season if he stays on that pace. 7 home runs, 292 batting average, 33 RBIs, 3 stolen bases. He's played in, I'm looking at the games played here, 82 games. OPS 758, OPS plus, that number we were referencing earlier of 115. So that is substantially above average. If you're just joining us, OPS plus is the baseline of an average player in the big leagues is 100. So a 115 OPS plus is a pretty significant chunk above that. Not huge, but certainly better than Bryan De La Cruz, who we've been talking about for much of the stream's numbers. Andrew, I'll go to you next if you're available. Thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, I really like his game. I mean, this is a guy who, like you guys have mentioned, has bounced around a little bit, was certainly a bigger prospect when he was first coming up, former 4th rounder out of Hawaii, actually. But I mean, I look at him as this fills an immediate need. The reality is that based off of what Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton have both said in various settings is that with Nick Gonzalez being injured, he's probably going to be out for weeks, not days. Just a guy who, personally speaking, I'd be surprised if we see him relatively soon. Like Nick Gonzalez probably going to be sidelined for a bit. So this fits an immediate need in the sense of, Kiner-Falefa can play second base every day for the time being, but he can also bounce around the infield if and when Gonzalez comes back this season. And it's not in a position of, okay, how do you make sure the guy still gets regular at bats? I think he can spell Brian Hayes more so at third base, every so often. You can play him in the outfield. You can play him in the infield. As Jason said, the Pirates certainly like their position versatility, and he does exactly that for this team. So I look at it as that's certainly a move that I like a lot. I think this one, maybe I'm a little bit higher on than De La Cruz, just given the performance this season, but you also have to look at the body of work and recognize that this is as good of a season that IKF has put together at the big league level.
Yes, he, as I'm looking here, did not post an OPS over 700 until this season, 646 last season, 642, 2022, 670 in 2021. He is, I think, what would we say, 29 years old. He's got 1 year left on his contract at $7.5 million. Big picture, guys. I mean, how does he fit in to the equation in that regard? Because that's a decent chunk of change in Pirates world to basically have agreed to pay for next season. Even when they've taken on buyer trades in the past in 2013 to 15 and even later in those windows when they were buyers. I don't think you saw them bring in a guy at that number. I guess I'll start with you, Paul. Does that surprise you that they brought in? Because I heard you talking on the radio today saying you thought maybe they were talking about adding $2.5 million in payroll.
Like I said, I think I said one of the things I'm trying to catch up here. One of the things I'm telling you is that there are a lot of, the same old sentiments about basically, Bob Nutting doesn't want to spend money. He doesn't want to add payroll. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to do that. But there was some evidence that I cited that maybe, people were being a little too hard on him from the standpoint of they have added payroll this year. They did go out and get Rowdy for 3. And they did go out and get Perez for 8 and, Marco Gonzalez for 3 or 3.5 or whatever it was. And of course, Chapman for $10.5 million. So, I do think that if you think about how much money they have or that they've gotten, or that they've added to their payroll, it's not that big of a surprise. And I think the other part of it is you got to remember, if you look to next year, right? Let's already look till next year. There's going to be, at the very least, $21 million that's not going to be on this payroll from this team next year in Chapman and Perez and Gonzalez, and maybe even 24 or 25 or whatever if you add in Rowdy Tellez. So, there is flexibility to spend some money next year. The thing about it is they just didn't dump the salary at the trade deadline that I thought they might. They might dump one of these guys to make up for it. So, I think it's good that they're adding payroll, but I think you also have to look at the big picture and understand, there's $21 million at least on this payroll that's not going to be on next year's payroll.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, Adam. It shouldn't be a big thing to add Isiah Kiner-Falefa at $7.5 million if he's a productive player and can do what you're expecting him to do. Bryan De La Cruz, ARB1, that's just the cost of doing business. And you can criticize the Pirates for how things have gone this season, but I would probably start with spending $34, $35, $36 million and not necessarily not spending enough, but spending what you did and spending it poorly. Like they didn't get enough for those dollars. Look at Grandal. Has Martin Perez been worth $8 million? No. Has Aroldis Chapman been worth $10.5 million? No. I forget what the number was. I added this up for my column today, and it was, I included Kutch, and it was a little over 1 win above replacement per Baseball Reference, and they spent about $37 million to get that. That's grossly inefficient. So, yeah, they want to win more. They want to get, payroll going up is not a problem. I would just argue that they need players to be productive inside of that. And I hope that's the case with Isiah Kiner-Falefa. I understand the logic behind the deal. I understand the logic behind the deal with Bryan De La Cruz. By the way, the return for Kiner-Falefa is Charles McAdoo, which I don't necessarily love. He's looked really good with Double-A Altoona. Was the number 29 ranked prospect, was probably about to bounce up even higher, but I don't know. It also addresses a position of major league need, so it is what it is. I don't want to be one of these types that just clings to prospects blindly. That you got to give to get, and that's fine.
What range do you think McAdoo could have bounced to in the next, what these things get evaluated, not in terms of when the trade deadline is, it's various times of the year. Would you have been surprised to see him in the top 15?
No,
maybe even the top 10, based on what he's done this season?
I wouldn't, but I also don't take that stuff as gospel. I think a lot of it becomes BS. Like Hudson Head was a top 10 prospect. Tucapita Marcano, Eddie Yeen, they were top 10 prospects. That doesn't mean jack. It really doesn't. I mean, until you're producing, it shows you that maybe you're a player worth paying attention to for fans more than other people. Maybe it shows potential, tools, all that stuff. But scouts get that stuff wrong. Sometimes it gets too much attention. The fact that McAdoo was doing what he was doing in Double-A, it's better than somebody doing that in the Dominican Summer League. Clearly, he's climbed a few rungs in the ladder. I like that. I've watched him play. He's got a pretty good game. He's athletic, has some pop, can do a couple different things. But again, you can't. We laugh about this, but I swear that people just want the Pirates to give all their bad players and get all the good players back. You're going to have to give up something if you have a major league need you're trying to fill, which they're trying to do. So yeah, Charles McAdoo is a good player, and now he plays for another team, and that's the world will go on.
Some numbers on McAdoo while we're waiting on potentially more deals. We know that they may be talking to the Astros about making a third deal here before the deadline. McAdoo was 1.7 years early on his level per Baseball Reference at 22, 269 batting average, 348 on base, 490 slug. That added up to an 838 OPS. So, solid numbers. And I always look at, are the numbers solid when you are young for the level? And he is, as opposed to a guy who's, either at, the average age for that level or above it. You would expect those guys to be dominating a little bit more. So yeah, I think there's a lot to the notion that he could, be a solid player in time. But, Paul, I'll go to you on this. Like you were saying before, you have to give up something to get something, and this fills an immediate need, and it's possible. He'll never amount to as much as Isiah Kiner-Falefa will. Just for the next year and a half for the Pirates.
Well, I think one of the things that's really important to me, I think, is that I said a long time ago, I don't really give a rip who these prospects are, because the chances that I can't even pronounce the one guy's name. The chances that these 3 or 4 guys that they're sending out to make their team better this year are going to become good players. It's a crapshoot. You know what I mean? You might as well go down to Rivers Casino and play craps and or whatever. And if you win money, then you say, yeah, they're going to be good. Or it's almost that much of a crapshoot. So I like this. Here's what I like about what the Pirates did. And I've been tough on them for the last few weeks because I felt like they've waited. But I do like the fact that they have gotten some infield depth. They've gotten an outfielder who should play every day. I would assume you're going to play him in right field every day, right? I would be okay if you play him in right field every day and play Michael A. Taylor every day, and the rest of that black hole, I don't know what to do with them, but if I never have to see them again, unless, it's maybe a Sunday lineup, I'd be happy. I think that, if you do that and, this utility infielder, you can play him at second a little bit. You can play him at third a little bit. You might even be able to play him at first. I don't know, a little bit if you have to. But I think they're a better team right now than they were yesterday, or even this morning, let's say yesterday. Because you also have to remember, they added some depth to their bullpen. They got a lefty for their bullpen. And, they also backfilled a little bit with some prospect types with the trade they made. Was it the Mets? They got a left-handed reliever who obviously was on waivers or whatever, but still he's a pre-arbitration guy. Who knows what he's going to be? And the kid they got from Boston. So to me, I'm looking at what they did, and I have a hard time criticizing them, absent of being able to say, well, they didn't go out and swing for the fences and make the big deal. We knew that wasn't going to happen. But what they did, I can live with, because I think that they did make themselves better. And really, they made themselves better for this year. I don't care about next year. I'll worry about that next year.
Jason, that's my question for you. I mean, to what extent do you think the Nick Gonzalez injury impacted the desire to go out and get Isiah Kiner-Falefa? I've been looking at this lineup for the last couple of weeks, and we've been talking so much about outfielders. I don't think Kiner-Falefa was really on many people's radars, but then Nick Gonzalez goes down. You look at what's happened with Ke'Bryan Hayes this season, and I think if you're evaluating listen, the Pirates have him signed for a long time. He's going to be their third baseman for a long time. But in the immediate term, he is struggling. Do you think this was geared toward that? Do you think it was geared toward the injury to Nick Gonzalez, maybe missing some time? What do you think the motivation was to go out and get this specific player who wasn't on many people's boards?
Yeah. So I think it was both, Adam. And honestly, I'm going to give the Pirates some credit here. We make fun of them or get infuriated by them or whatever when we say they've not, moved earlier. They haven't. What are they waiting for? What's Cherington doing? Well, they're waiting, I think, for stuff like this, and because you never know what could happen. If they would have acted earlier, who knows if they would have gone a different route with the outfielder, and maybe that took them out of the Isiah Kiner-Falefa spot, and then they're not able to upgrade second base because they've already made their move without knowing any sort of thing going on with Nick Gonzalez, injuries, etc. I'm making some things up there, but in this case, I do think it benefited them that they kind of slow played this and then could react to, we see what's going on at the Marlins today. They're selling everybody. So I think they got a pretty good sale on Bryan De La Cruz. Isiah Kiner-Falefa then became, fittable. That's not a word, but they can obtain him for a fairly reasonable price, and it addresses a weakness they have with Nick Gonzalez. So honestly, in this case, it's kind of answering your question, but it's just bringing up another, school of thought here that they did themselves some good by just waiting a little bit.
Was this and I'll pose this to both of you, are they buzzing Ke'Bryan Hayes' tower at all? Or is he still on scholarship with his sub 600 OPS? And like I said, you've got him under contract. He's probably not going anywhere. He's a guy that you got to get fixed in the long term. But is this a suggestion that, listen, man, we're not going to run you out there every day if you keep hitting like this? We have a viable option to run out there at third base and jockey with you for that job for the time being to kind of get things in gear.
I mean, I hope so. I just had a quick comment, Paul. Go ahead, but I mean,
I'm just
saying.
My thing with that is I still believe that they're going to really give Ke'Bryan Hayes every opportunity to figure out what's going on here at the plate. I mean, and they're able to justify it because they, because of his glove. That being said, again, I'm of the school of thought that you've got to play this year to win. Period. Got to play to win this year, and everything else has got to be secondary to trying to win this year. And if that means Ke'Bryan Hayes takes the seat for a while or whatever, I'm all for it. I mean, so I think that's why you go out and get a guy like that, like they went and got, because it gives them the ability to fill in where Nick Gonzalez is hurt, obviously. It gives them the ability to, maybe give Ke'Bryan Hayes some days off, and that's been a consideration because of some of his injury stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, they've given themselves a lot of flexibility here to do whatever they got to do to get it right. So I don't have a problem with it at all.
Jason, your thoughts on Hayes and where he stands in the short term here with this team?
I mean, I don't think anything's going to change, Adam. I think the only thing that can change or might be a little bit different down the stretch is keeping him fresh. They're not going to sit Ke'Bryan Hayes. They're invested in him, and ultimately they need to get him right. I thought they had a formula the last 2 months of last season. where they, kept him a little bit more fresh, get him off his feet, whatever. I think maybe Kiner-Falefa does that, gives them an opportunity to keep a bat in the lineup where previously you were playing Jared Triolo and you were losing a lot offensively. I don't know. But I don't know what you can do. I don't see them trading him. I mean, that could be famous last words. But no, I see him being a part of this thing and them having to figure out a way to get more out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of it is, what do we have here? About another 15 minutes. So basically, we've got about another 45 minutes because you know how it is. There's trades that seem to come in, that are finalized at before 6, but the details and all of the legal stuff don't go for another 10, 15 minutes. So we probably got about another half hour, I would say. And I predict that there'll be at least one more deal by the Pirates. I don't know what it'll be, probably a minor deal or something, but I have a feeling they've got one more up their sleeve. What
do you think? What do you think they do? I agree with you. I just can't. Andrew, what do you think? One more deal. What is it going to
be? Give me another left-handed reliever. Real exciting. That's where I'm going. Yeah, I have no idea, honestly. I'm sorry. I'm just getting my bearings. I don't know. The IKF deal really caught me by surprise because that, to me, fits so many immediate needs and it's projectable not just for this year, but for next year with the contract and all of that. I can't imagine it's a big deal, especially with Eloy Jimenez just going out. Like, it can't be a big one, right? But you figure it's probably something on the position player side. They probably do something offensively, I figure, but maybe it's moving guys from the Major League roster. Maybe it's moving on from a Martin Perez or a Marco Gonzalez and seeing if you can get somebody back either for the bullpen or on the offensive side. I'm not sure, but I have to think there's at least one more move there remaining.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think they're going to offload one of those guys just to offset some of the salary stuff. And one of those guys is expendable, really. I know we can never have enough pitching, but I think the Pirates have enough pitching, number one. And number two, I think that, the bottom line is always a consideration with the Pirates, no matter what. If you offload Martin Perez, for instance, does it really change this roster? No, really, probably not, especially now with Bailey Falter healthy again. If you offload him, and especially with Louis, the way that Ortiz has pitched, I mean, you basically are in a really good spot with Gonzalez, Ortiz, Falter, you've got Skenes, and I know Jones is hurt, but you can have him come back. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to move on from somebody like that, I could absolutely see that being the kind of deal you do. You save, probably $3.5 million on Perez, and I don't know that you change your team or make it worse. So I could absolutely. I think that's the kind of deal we're going to see. Maybe offloading, maybe a little bit of salary. I don't know. Perez is the kind of guy. Maybe you swap him and you're able to bring a little reliever in. Another reliever that helps your bullpen or whatever. So we'll see what happens. But I think we got about another half hour before everything will be really, really done.
Nobody does a right under the wire deal quite like the Buccos. They're good for a 5.59, even a later special than that.
Yeah, I got to remind people, just because the deadline is at 6 p.m. doesn't mean we always know exactly, when they're done at 6 p.m. It can be 6:15, 6:30. Rarely does it get too far beyond that, but just because it's 6 p.m. and you haven't heard anything official does not mean that they are done. Everything has to be submitted to the league office by 6 p.m. But in terms of the reportage and the announcements, sometimes that lags a little bit. Guys, I have noticeably seen the tone in the chat change. Maybe some people are just being a little quiet, but there was a lot of doom and gloom here at the beginning. We got Young Guru 97 saying, "What a great day to be a Bucco fan." Mark Lancaster saying, "I'm optimistic again. Nice to breathe again." To what extent do you guys think they have already checked the box, pending any further moves, in terms of what they had to do? Not just, to compete this season and get the most out of this team that has taken a step in the right direction, but, to allay the concerns of fans that they've been ignorant of where they stand, Paul Skenes is only going to be here for so long in all likelihood, unless the Pirates do something very un-Pirate. And now, do you see these moves as a recognition of that fact, and that it's getting late early in some regard?
Yeah, I think this. One of my fears here, Adam, just because all of us would have to wallow in it, was that they would just let the deadline go and not do anything and sort of hunker down and just say, we're fine, and then come out with some reasoning for why they didn't need to add to the offense. I think this is adding to the offense in a logical way that people can understand. Like, you're talking about Isiah Kiner-Falefa, a name that people probably know. He can play a couple different positions. He's having a good year. He should be able to add some things offensively. They're not giving up prospects that are going to, hurt anything. Like, they're reasonable players. I'm not discounting them. And then you're adding somebody in Bryan De La Cruz who's going to help you, again, not only this year, but in the future at a position of weakness. So to me, this is, it's not Brent Rooker. It wasn't going to be. I think we knew that. But I think I also see this as some acknowledgement on the Pirates side where they're showing we're willing to add some money here. We're willing to give to get, and we're willing to do things that help us, for more than just 2 months.
Andrew, I want to pose that same question to you in terms of how you feel they've checked the boxes that they had to check already at this point.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think I would be more content if you were a Pirates fan if Nick Gonzalez was still healthy and you were adding IKF. Like, that feels like that would be more of an upgrade versus this is kind of like treading water the more I think about it. Maybe that tune changes whenever Gonzalez comes back, but I think regardless, this is about as much as you could have expected. I think, yeah, each of these players are a little bit different, right? Like, Lane Thomas is different from Jesse Winker, who's different from Bryan De La Cruz, who's different from Tommy Pham. At the end of the day, all those players kind of fit under a relatively similar billing. And, they were never, as Jason said, they were never going to get that big fish. They were never going to make that true big splash play, just given whether that was the prospect capital, whether it was going to take, as the Pirates officially announced it, that they're acquiring Isiah Kiner-Falefa. But regardless, yeah, I look at it as, hey, these are all guys who they supplement the offense. But at the end of the day, for this team to qualify for the postseason to actually get there, it's not going to be because Bryan De La Cruz goes on some massive tear. Maybe that happens, but I would say you're putting too many eggs in that basket, and same for IKF. I view this as these are guys that are supplementary, and you're still going to need to be carried by your Bryan Reynoldses, your O'Neill Cruzes. You're still going to need some other guys to take it the next step up with their play. I think that's the way that you get there. These are additional pieces, which maybe that's what everybody expected in the first place. Maybe that's the reason for the more positive tenor. But that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Is these are guys that are going to help. They are not the help, if that makes any degree of sense.
Let me ask this question, Paul. Is it also a matter of this? There's a baseline level of competence to these guys that was not there with, say, Jack Sawinski and some of these other guys that the Pirates have been running out there. They're professionals and clear. I shouldn't disparage Jack Sawinski in that way. He is a professional. He's just not a very good professional. Do you think part of why people are feeling good about these moves is that it's just raising the baseline on kind of that bottom of the roster where I think a lot of people have been tearing their hair out for weeks?
Well, absolutely. I think that's really, if you think about it, what people have been screaming about for how many weeks now. Is to be able to be free of some of that black hole. I call it the black hole of outfielders not named Bryan Reynolds. This gives them a little relief from that. And I hate to say it like this too, but when Nick Gonzalez comes back, you hope it gives them some relief from Jared Triola. I know everyone loves him, and he made a nice diving catch the other day, but he's not really. He's a quad A player, and it's got a reasonably good glove. I mean, my point is, if you can upgrade the bottom of that roster and knock some of these guys off. Well, actually, the first guy we're going to get rid of, hopefully, or see the end of is Alika Williams, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, my point is these guys that are at the bottom of the roster who are just, who just have not been very good. I think that's going to be an important thing for Pirate fans, the psyche of Pirate fans. The one thing I will say is that if this deal could have happened 2 weeks ago for De La Cruz, and what did they give up, the 17th and 18th prospect? Is that what they gave up?
Yep.
Okay. If 2 weeks ago it would have cost them the 12th and 15th prospect and they didn't do it, I say that that's the problem. Because to me, I think that this team is going to be, really, really, really close when it comes to the wild card. And, every game in my estimation, every single game mattered. So, we'll see how it plays out. But I hope that we're not sitting here, doing this little roundtable thing in September saying, boy, they waited a little too long to pull the trigger on a couple of deals. Because they wanted to hold on to guys who may or may not down the road become good players. That's the only caveat I have here. But I like what they've done. I think they've made their team better. They've gotten better options now, and so because of that, I think that you can really start to structure. Okay, every day now you've got at least two outfielders, I would say, in De La Cruz and Reynolds, that are going to be in the lineup pretty much every single day. I would be willing to probably now say that let's give Michael A. Taylor an extended look.
Yep.
His glove is good enough. He has hit in the past. Let's give him an extended look in center field, because if he starts hitting even a reasonable amount better than what he's been hitting, now all of a sudden you look in the outfield, you kind of like what you see, and it also frees you from this idea that we have to play Connor Joe and Edward Olivares and Josh Palacios and all the rest of these guys. It's a pennant race now. You got 50 games to win. And the hell with all of we got to keep guys sharp and we got to do all this other stuff. Put your best guys out there every day and let's see where it takes you.
And you know what, Paul? I really like for what De La Cruz has done defensively. Like, he's got tools. Like, he can run a little bit. And he's got a good arm, but he hasn't played a great outfield. Put him next to Taylor. Like, Taylor can go get it. We know he can play a good defensive center field. I would like to see them just sit him down and say, we're not going to mess with you. We're not taking you out, righty, lefty. I don't care, but we need you to play center field.
Here we go. Says this Francis Romero, I think he's a reputable guy, says Martin Perez to the Padres.
There you go. For what? Anything?
It hasn't said yet. He just said Martin Perez to the Padres.
There we go. Ronaldez Jimenez, a DSL player, is the return. Yep.
Who is it?
A player in the Dominican Summer League. So it's a salary dump.
Which is exactly what we said. You know what I'm saying? So,
he shoots, he scores. Zeise.
I'm just telling you. I mean, that's. I've been covering this team. Not like you have covered it, Jason, or you, Andrew. But I've been writing about the Pirates and covering the Pirates. And believe it or not, there was a point when this would have been. I forget what year this was, but there was a point when we had one Pirates writer who resigned via email at 7 a.m. on a Monday after the second series of the season, and another who resigned to go take a job as a columnist or something at the other paper. And so this was literally like April. We had no Pirates writers, so it was basically like, Paul, you have to help us cover the Pirates. So there was me, and that year a very young, basically I think he might have still been a 2-year intern named Bill Brink. Yes, we were the Pirates writers for the year. So my point is, you just kind of have to know how the Pirates operate, and so I felt like that they were the idea that they were not going to add salary. I didn't agree with that. I knew that they were going to add a little bit, but I also knew that meant somebody like Perez or Gonzalez, or if they were adding somebody big, Chapman was probably going to go the other way. So I think that it's not a surprise. And there's your what is that $3.5 million probably they say on his contract, and maybe a little bit less than that. But
it's Kiner-Falefa, 7.5 to 8. That's
exactly.
And De La Cruz was a nothing because he's like $750K or something.
Right.
That's them making the money work.
Yeah. So that's all that is. That's why again, when we talked about Kiner-Falefa or whatever the hell his name is for next year, they're already going to get rid of Chapman and Gonzalez off their books and maybe even
Right.
Raul Tellez. There's money there to play with.
Yeah.
But yes, this, again, I don't have a problem with them trading Martin Perez. I don't think it changes their profile even a little bit. And, it saves a little bit of money for them. What we have to see is what's their payroll? What was their payroll on Sunday and what's it going to be tomorrow? And I bet you that it's going to be very, very similar.
Yep.
Guys, it is 6:01 p.m. The trade deadline has come and gone. If the Pirates have done anything else, it is at the league office. We will hang on for a little bit. Jason and Andrew are going to have to hop off here at some point to hear what Ben Cherington has to say about all this. So make sure you stay tuned to the YouTube channel and postgazette.com for all of the coverage that comes out of that news conference. Obviously, Noah Hiles is in Houston covering the Pirates playing the Astros tonight. So make sure you're signed up for that. If I told you at the beginning of this live stream to scroll forward 1 hour and look for, what happened and us assuming that it was going to go straight up to the deadline, you should go back to the beginning because the Pirates made deals almost immediately. Bryan De La Cruz from the Miami Marlins, Isiah Kiner-Falefa from the Toronto Blue Jays, and they've traded Martin Perez to the San Diego Padres. That's what we were just talking about. Just wanted to reset here at the top of the hour so that everyone's caught up on where things stand. So, yeah, if you scroll to the 1 hour mark, scroll back because you missed a lot. Jason, I'll pose this to you. There were some names that we talked a lot about going into this deadline. Brent Rooker, Jazz Chisholm was a guy that a lot of people were talking about that the Pirates were reportedly, runners up for, depending upon, what reporting you've seen. I think you mentioned JJ Bleday from the Oakland Athletics was the guy that you really liked. How does what they've done line up with those guys in your mind? Are you disappointed that the Pirates did not get them, or do you think these guys are reasonable facsimiles that you got to be pleased with, overall?
Well, I mean, given the circumstances, I'm fine with what the Pirates did. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Bryan De La Cruz is an equivalent player to Brent Rooker because he's not. But if the A's don't want to move Rooker, which they reportedly did not, and even, if you're the Pirates, I don't know how big of an overpay that would have been to convince somebody who doesn't want to do something to do it. So, I mean, yeah, I would have rather had him. I mean, we're talking about a 950 OPS compared to about a 710, 711 OPS for De La Cruz. So, I mean, yeah, it's not the same player, but out of the available options, out of what the Pirates gave up, I don't have an issue whatsoever with what they did. I thought they would get a bat like De La Cruz, as we were saying on here before it broke. To me, Isiah Kiner-Falefa for your number 29th ranked prospect is a nice little added bonus. I think they've made their team better and answered some questions as far as second base depth, even third base depth, a utility guy. I think they've made their team better in two ways. So all things considered, given what was available, what was out there, I'm completely fine with it, Adam.
Andrew, I'll get your thoughts on that same question. I mean, I know I've heard you guys on the radio, especially with Brent Rooker, saying, listen, it's probably going to have a cost, and B, he's not great defensively. So, and you've already got Andrew McCutchen on the roster. That would have made that whole situation complicated as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see any way that would have made a great deal of logical sense, just given the prospect capital it would have required. I mean, if it would have taken 4 or 5 prospects to get a guy like Brent Rooker, who, let's face it, I mean, as much as he's had a tremendous season, as much as he was an all-star last year, he was a late bloomer. He's a guy who truly does swing for the fences, and in today's modern era of baseball, it works, and he's improved the bat-to-ball skills, but still, there's the huge whiff rate. There's the concern of, is this just a BABIP guy who's falling into some good fortunes that, yeah, he hits the ball hard, but he's getting really lucky with it. Who's to say that doesn't regress? Now, in fairness, it's at the Oakland Coliseum. He's hitting in a pitcher's-friendly park, but regardless, I look at it as it would have been a lot to gain just one guy who I don't think on his own would have been enough to catapult the team or really impact the offense in that tangible of a way. I'd much rather they go out and get a couple of guys, like go get Bryan De La Cruz, go get Isiah Kiner-Falefa. Like, those are two guys that I view as they fill some more immediate needs. They can help defensively, or at the very least, IKF can up the middle, especially with Nick Gonzalez out. Bryan De La Cruz is an impact bat in some regards. I view this as a success of a trade deadline, which if you asked me that question 2 hours ago, it wasn't. But that's just the nature of these things, right? So I look at it as it's a good deal of business, what they did end up doing. And I have no problems with the moves. I look at them as ones that, you look back on and say, this has made the team tangibly better and in a better spot in 2024. And frankly, in 2025 as well, given that both these guys will be part of the club next year, assuming that they don't move on from either of them.
I want to talk about.
I feel so bad for the Dodgers. I mean, they have it so tough all the time, and they have to figure out a way now to pay Jack Flaherty. I mean,
ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Every so often, I look at these trades and these guys that are going. It's like, how do the Dodgers and the Yankees? I wish someone could explain this to me. How do they possibly every single year? I mean, they must have the most incredible draft and develop talent guys in the world, that they have the prospect capital to make these kind of deals every single year.
I have a question about this deadline haul. I think Paul will knock this out of the park. Who's going to now celebrate by dumping water and sunflower seeds on everybody now? Such an essential part of Pirates games is now. How do we fix this?
They were talking about that in the comments.
I'm thrilled that that's gone. I was over that.
It was gross.
Yeah. Well, here's one more deal if we care. Pirates send right-handed pitcher Patrick Riley. Do we know who that is?
Yeah.
Minor league deal.
To the Orioles for outfielder Billy Cook. Andrew, you're the expert. Patrick Riley. I mean, are we 3 years from now we're going to be watching the Orioles and saying, "Damn, that guy! We could have had that guy."
So I will say this: Riley at Vanderbilt was a guy who never really figured it out at Vandy, but pitched at obviously a very, very good college baseball program and had really started to settle in this year. He'd been a good minor leaguer for the Pirates. I will start with that. However, he's a right-handed arm. They have a million of those. This guy was expendable. I have no problem with that. He had taken leaps and bounds. He was in the middle of a really good minor league season, but that's the kind of guy you have to kind of be willing to part with. So, Paul, I promise you, rest assured, you don't need to worry too much about him pitching for the Orioles. And even if he does, you tip the cap to the guy. That's how I approach that.
Well, I'm just saying, it's one of those things where these are one of those deals that might not mean a thing to either team 2 years, over the next 2 or 3 years. But it's another deal. So I now have to, so you now have to add it all up and see, okay, here are the guys that the Pirates got for all of these guys that they sent out. I think I agree with Adam, especially for this year. I think they got the better of the deal.
Yeah, and I think with you throw the Quinn Priester deal in there as well. You've given yourself a chance to. We've talked about how the lack of bats in the system is a concern. You brought some bats back that aren't just even De La Cruz and Kiner-Falefa, big league guys, but minor league guys that now you can maybe look forward to them coming up and making contributions where that's not really where the Pirates were before. They may amount to nothing, probably will amount to nothing, but it's at least a recognition of taking an asset that you were strong in and moving it into places that maybe you weren't, and seeing how that turns out. I think that's generally a good thing. Guys, while we're waiting, few more minutes here to see if anything else trickles in. Obviously, there's still that rumor out there that the Pirates were talking to the Astros about a deal. How does this affect your expectations for the rest of the season? Is this playoffs or bust? Is this, make a good run at it and you feel good about the season? And do the deals that they've made today meaningfully change, where you were 24 hours ago in terms of what you're expecting from the team overall? I'll start with Jason.
I think it should be still playoffs or bust, Adam. Yeah, I think that should be the barometer. It's been long enough. They're in it. I'm not looking at them to win the division. I still don't think they're good enough to win the division, but do I think they're good enough to hang around with the wild card spot? Yeah, I do. I ultimately, before today, I didn't think they were good enough to get in, and I'm not sure if they did enough in and around the trade deadline to make me feel differently about that. I still worry that they're just going to come up a little bit short. And I worry that they've given away too many games previously that they should have won. But I do think they're going to be right there in it. I do think they're going to be right there in it because of their pitching. And I mean, I'm glad to see that they have recognized the opportunity in front of them, that they've addressed their offense. They needed to. But, if you're going to give this team a chance, if this team has an identity, I don't think that's changed. It's very much starting pitching. The bullpen has remained intact. I like that. They've even added to it with the Jalen Beeks trade of last night. So, yeah, I mean, I still feel pretty good about it. I think they're going to be playing meaningful baseball all the way down to the end. I just worry that, they come up a little bit short. What do you guys think?
I'll go to Andrew next.
Yeah, I mean, I fall on a little bit of a spot of, okay, yeah, playoffs are bust, right? Like, the guy gets the postseason. That's got to be the goal here. There's a few concerns with that, right? Is that, okay, you got some guys who are banged up. You've got the reality that Jared Jones and Paul Skenes, these guys are young pitchers who's to say how they manage their innings down the stretch here, right? I mean, it's been pretty clear of what they're going to do with Skenes of, okay, he's going to be able to go the whole way. Jones is coming back from the injury, but these are a lot of question marks for me. I think they're going to be fully available. But I say all that to say that make sure the expectations are still there of, okay, get to the postseason, get there, right? But there's a lot of concerns. It's not a clear and concrete path. So I'm not saying that I'm moving the goalposts up or anything like that. I look at these moves as it's a very clear path of what they're trying to do. They are trying to get to the postseason. However, it is not this aggressive, completely all in at all costs. This is 2024 or nothing, everything beyond that. Like, there's still, my interpretation of these moves is that there's still very much that we're looking at 2025. We're looking at the future. It's not just this 1 year window and then it's done. It's, hey, this is a few years long stretch. These are moves that make us better for next year as well. But even if they don't get to the postseason, let's say they go 84-78 and that's not good enough. I still think what they did at this trade deadline put them in a better spot for next season. It put them in a better spot for right now. And that's the important thing. That's the way that I interpret it. That's the way that I would view these deadline moves.
Playoffs? Playoffs? Talking about the playoffs. Sorry, Benjamin Perez in the comments section got me thinking that.
Always postseason. Always postseason.
Paul, what are your have your expectations changed at all, or a little, or how are you viewing that?
Well, interestingly enough, Andrew and I argue on the radio every Tuesday in the mornings about certain things, and one of the things that I really struggled with over the last month is this notion that if the Pirates went out and unloaded and really went after a couple of guys, that they were going all in for a 1 year thing or a 1 year window. I don't believe you can be going all in for a 1 year window when your window includes 4 years of Mitch Keller, 5 years of Paul Skenes, 5 years of Jared Jones, 4 years of Bailey Falter, 4 or 5 more years of O'Neal Cruz, 4 or 5 more years of Reynolds. I mean, you have a lot of good pieces that you're going to start all of the next 4 years with. So, and then, that doesn't include the Nick Gonzalez's and, the Bermuda Triangle of catchers they have. I mean, the bottom line is you've got, a lot of guys that are in place for a lot of years. So to me, I think every offseason you'd be aggressive in the next 3 or 4 years. You operate almost like the team across the city there, the Penguins do. Every offseason you're aggressive in trying to add pieces to a core that is, really pretty good and you have under control for a long, long time. So, to me, I would have liked them to be more aggressive than they were, but by the same token, I've been covering the Pirates for a long, long time. I'm happy they made some moves. I do believe that the playoffs need to be, the goal this year. And I think that if they get in, given their starting pitching, they're going to have a really good chance to do something when they're there. I don't believe in this idea that, we can, let's try and extend, let's try and extend the number of years that we're going to, before we start really having expectations for this team. To me, expectations started this year in my mind. And when you brought up Paul Skenes and you saw the rest of the league around you, you had to kind of look at it and say, boy, you know what? We had a couple of bats. We're right in this thing. So I am not a fan of the idea that, they that they had to hold back a little bit because this might not be the year. I look at what they have for the next 4 or 5 years and say they've got an infrastructure in place. Whereas in every offseason they could add, if some of these prospect types either get traded away or don't pan out, they should be in the mode that as long as we have Skenes and Jones at the top of our rotation, we're going to try and win every single year.
Andrew and Jason, I don't know if you guys have any information on it or not, but we're getting questions in the comments about whether Connor Griffin, the first round draft pick this season, signed by the deadline or not. Do you guys have any intel on that at the moment?
Yeah, the deadline is not until Thursday, so they've got a couple of days to work with.
There you go, everybody.
What's that? Sorry.
I said, there you go, everybody.
Yeah, so they still got a couple of days to work with, actively working on it, still ironing out details. We're going to find out soon enough, but I would say stay tuned in the next 24 hours or so. We'll probably get some more information on that front.
And for what it's worth, the night he was drafted, Griffin said that he wanted to get his pro career started.
Yeah.
So I would say that in my time covering the Pirates, they've always spent their allotted, since they reworked the draft, they spent every dollar of their allotted amount. A lot of times those discussions are had in advance, or you have an idea of what a guy could be looking for. The Pirates have not skimped on that area. I understand the finances in other places. So I've been asked the same thing. I have no concerns that they're not going to sign him, put it that way.
Hey, Andrew Filipponi is really, really good at predictions. Just basically said that Billy Cook is the next Brian Giles. I feel bad for Billy Cook because that probably means his career is already over before it starts. But anyway, Jose Canseco just tweeted out that the New York Yankees are finalizing a deal to acquire Jose Canseco to replace Aaron Judge. Per John Heyman. Could you imagine Jose Canseco and Antonio Brown in a room? I would love to sit down and have a podcast with those two, Antonio Brown and Jose Canseco. That would be incredible.
Yeah,
that would be an incredible study in CTE, I think. But go ahead.
Yeah, the Go Away podcast, please.
Guys, I'm just going to let that one go, and then I'm going to pivot to this question before we start to wrap things up here, because I know Jason and Andrew specifically got to get going here soon. How do you think this affects the off season to come? Is it going to be a quiet off season where they point to the moves they made at the deadline and say, we brought these guys in for next season, these were some of our more significant moves for 2025? Or do you think that they're going to still go into 2025 and say, we've got to make this lineup better. We've improved, but we still got to make it better from there?
I think it's going to be more concentrated. I think you saw, them spend $34 million this year on several players and not particularly well. I think the goal should be to have many fewer holes, but to have them be of greater need and spend more money on those. I don't know where they're going to be. I can kind of take a guess, but if you look at like catcher, Joey Bart should have that position locked down. I don't know what you do with Ke'Bryan Hayes. O'Neal Cruz is going to play shortstop, second base, probably TBD. I think you might need a first baseman at this point. Still, we have that discussion every offseason. You maybe need another outfielder. Probably. Maybe Kiner-Falefa goes out. I don't know. But I mean, I don't think it'll be like 6 or 7 players deep, Adam. I think it should be maybe the same amount of money, but like 2, 3, 4 players deep. What about you guys?
Well, someone actually just put it here in paper. This helps me see it. The Pirates traded today, Martin Perez, Jun-Seok Shim, Charles McAdoo, Quinn Priester, Garret Forrester, Patrick Riley, Nicholas Caruano, and Luis Peralta. I think we can all agree that I don't know that necessarily any of those guys will be missed. And they brought back Bryan De La Cruz, Isiah Kiner-Falefa, Nick York, Ronaldez Hernandez, Billy Cook, Josh Walker, and Jalen Beeks. And I would tell you that I think Beeks, De La Cruz, and Kiner-Falefa makes the team better.
Yep.
So they're better this year. That's the way I look at it. I mean, you got rid of a bunch of what I call fantasy players for the most part, except for Perez, and you brought back 3 guys that can help your team this year
and next year. Andrew, any final thoughts on the long-term impact here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I view it as okay. It's really there's so many factors at play here, right? Of does payroll increase? One thing that I find interesting is what does Pittsburgh look like as a free agent destination next year? You look at it and say, okay, you've got some really marketable guys in Jared Jones and Paul Skenes, and obviously you have Mitch Keller locked up, and you have Bryan Reynolds. Like, does this change the calculus of do you go about extending an O'Neal Cruz? Does this make it a more intriguing place for guys from outside the franchise to want to come here? I think those are really interesting questions. So I think maybe nothing specific to the trade deadline, but I would say that these moves, I can't imagine they change anything terribly much about how they go into the offseason. But I would say that this team, it's obvious, right? They're a winning team. They're one that's competitive. Naturally, that's going to attract, more interested players who want to win elsewhere. And maybe Pittsburgh's that spot. It's not Los Angeles, it's not New York, but I would say that if there was ever a relatively small market team in the league that is an interesting one for players to join, I would say that this is certainly one of them. As we confirm that Bryan De La Cruz is indeed getting traded to the Pirates.
There's that confirmation. Guys, do we feel good about where we are here? Are we ready to wrap this thing up, or do we think that anything else is coming?
I'll tell you one thing I would love to figure out is who the hell is on the Padres right now? Because maybe it's just you see these, but see, it feels like they've made like 15 trades in this thing.
The Marlins too.
Yeah, the Marlins. I mean, as I said on social media, I mean, the Marlins, all 28 of their fans have to be thrilled with the fact that they're going to go to the next home game and not know a single guy on the roster.
Also, I'm glad that we finally got confirmation of Bryan De La Cruz being traded as I watch video from Miami of him being told that he was traded.
Yeah. Gotta love it, man. Gotta love it.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, the Marlins, Craig Mish had a good tweet. 14 new prospects entering the Marlins franchise. That's crazy. I don't know how many trades that involves with players going out. It's got to be at least 7 or 8.
Right. And I mean, again, what does that mean down the road?
Right.
Like, I mean,
no clue.
The amazing thing is that the Marlins have won, 2 World Series, I think. Right? They won at least one with Leland, and I think they
97.
won
97, and they won another one. They were in the playoffs last year.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're a Pirates fan, you're making fun of the Marlins right now, but then you say, well, wait a minute. They've actually had more success the last 25 years than the Pirates have.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out with all of that. Barring any objections, I think I'm going to end the stream here, guys. Great chat. I think this worked out better than I have a whole page of filibuster material here. We didn't even really get to talking about Quinn Priester, that trade, and what that says about the Pirates development regime. I guess.
Can I say one thing? The Diamondbacks have been really active today too, and aren't they coming to town like this weekend?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just added a reliever from Washington. They have been very active too. They're a team that they feel like they're, and the only reason I bring up the Diamondbacks and the Padres is those 2 teams are in the mix with the Pirates and a couple of other teams trying to get the wild card. The one team that I thought was kind of suspiciously quiet, the Braves. Compared to the other teams, I'm just saying these are teams that the Pirates are quote unquote battling with.
Yeah, Josh Bell with the Diamondbacks too, by the way.
Right,
he's one of their bats.
All right, everyone. Well, I think we're going to wrap it here. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Andrew. Let you guys get out and do your work. I believe, Andrew, you're going to be back with Noah at some point here, wrapping the trade deadline. So if anything happens with the Astros or any other last-minute deals that come through, make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got tons of Steelers training camp coverage coming your way. Of course, Jason, you do your daily podcast, so he'll be reacting as well. Get a few more second-day thoughts about the trade deadline. Paul and I will be back on Thursday. We'll be talking Steelers and Pirates. So lots more coming your way. If you just found this because of the trade deadline, we hope you stay. And make sure you subscribe to postgazette.com because that's where all of our written work goes. That's all I got for you guys. Thanks for stopping by. And we will talk to you again real soon.
All right, we'll see you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, guys.